Yes, thank you, Jared. Hello and welcome to the Midweek Tackle. A massive day of news out in the West, plus our opening round could look a little differently next year. That's all coming up shortly. My name is Jay Clark, joined by Glenn McFarlane and Johnny Ralph from the Herald Sun. Ralphie, we have to start with Adam Simpson's tenure at West Coast. It is over. Tell us how this played out behind the scenes over the last 24 hours.
Well, Clarkie, Adam Simpson simply was not prepared to put his family through that hellish existence of the 10 weeks of last season if he was zero chance to coach on next year. That is as simply as I can put it. I've just spoken to his long-term manager in Shane Casley. He says when Simpson and Don Pike met at 4 o'clock yesterday, Simpson said to Pike, "Is there any chance I can fulfil my contract? 1%, 10%, 20%? Pike told him plain, there is no chance that you will go on. And so from then on in, that fight in Simpson was extinguished. And so he has drawn up a list of pros and cons about coaching a farewell game this week against Brisbane. As Casley says, it is not his way. It's not what he's interested in. He's certainly being pushed by senior figures to say this is about the club, this is about a farewell. So Jared Schofield will be the interim, either the week after or potentially this week. So I hope he agrees tomorrow morning. I think he's favouring that. And I hope he gets the farewell that Nathan Buckley got, which was absolutely perfect, even though, of course, he missed the premiership for West Coast. But I think Nathan Buckley would have regretted it, and I think that Adam Simpson would as well.
So that's interesting, Ralph. You're saying his cards were definitely marked at the end of the season. Adam Simpson said goodbye at his farewell press conference today, and as you can see, it was a little awkward and testy at times.
We've requested that Adam to consider coaching the side for one final time this weekend. So, as much as today is the announcement of the finish, we'd love Adam to coach one more time. I'll hand over to Adam. Thanks very much.
Yeah, we haven't made that call just yet, Pikey, if I was going to coach this week, but
we'd like you to.
Yeah, thanks, mate. Family, I better thank them. Feels like I'm retiring all over again, but yeah, we're going to check the Disney Plus. Might get the flick, kids. The money's going to dry up a little bit. Take my Visa card off your phones, and you guys can be cruel sometimes. Really, I mean, you got to keep that in check because we're human and we have families. So you want more access to our players, treat them with a bit more respect. Would be a good start.
It was an interesting farewell. Gut feel the Disney subscription might just continue. It is time now to bring in the senior sports writer from Code Sports, Mark Duffield, very senior figure in the West for the last 30 years. Interesting press conference, Duff. How did you read Adam Simpson's reaction in this one? Did you feel he was emotional, shattered, frustrated? What was your take on him?
I think he was exhausted, a little bit relieved and quite emotional. It felt like he was keeping his emotions in check for most of the press conference, and obviously a couple of times he did give one journalist a bit of a clip at one stage. Well, actually quite a clip at one stage. But look, I think he feels that he knows the time is right. It's been a very much an ordeal, I think, the last 2 or 3 years for Adam and his family, and he knows the time has come for him to hand over the reins.
Duff, let's be honest, this looks shambolic. They had 18 hours, the club, to get their ducks in a row in terms of whether Simmos was going to coach a farewell game or not. How could they get it so horribly wrong, and will he coach this weekend?
Well, there's still no answer on that. I texted Don Pike about an hour ago and he said that he doesn't expect an answer for a couple of days. To be honest, I hope he doesn't. I think Adam Simpson's the kind of guy, he's a competitor. You know, he comes from the old shin bone of spirit days. I think he knows when you're done, you're done. And I suspect it wouldn't sit that well with Adam to go and do that lap of honour at Optus Stadium this weekend against Brisbane. So, like, personally for him, I hope that he doesn't. Maybe send him out and get him to wave at the crowd if he's prepared to come along to the game. But they've got 7 weeks. They've got a lot to do in these 7 weeks, West Coast. They've got to do a bit of an exploration on their list because they've got some big list management decisions to come at the end of the season. So they should get started on that now.
Yes, that's certainly right, Duff. What about the replacement options? Sydney's Dean Cox feels like the short price favourite at the moment, but Ashley Hansen at Carlton, highly rated, and Jamie Graham from Fremantle also up in the mix. How do you feel like this is going to play out over the next month or so?
Well, history says that the replacement coach comes from the senior assistant crop at one of the successful clubs. Right now, Dean Cox is at Sydney, who are first, and Ash Hansen is at Carlton, who are second, and Jamie Graham is at Fremantle, who are third. So there's a happy coincidence for the club that those people are at those clubs and they have an association with the West Coast Eagles. But you'd like to see them run a process. I mean, there are others, you know, Daniel G and Syracusa has got to be worth a chat. Andrew McWalter's handled himself pretty well when in the senior post temporarily before. And I think the other thing is that if you're a club like West Coast, you've got to have a throw at the stumps, don't you? And at least pick up the phone and make the call to the Chris Scotts and the John Longmires of the world and just ask the question before you move on to getting an untried assistant.
You'd be stunned if he hadn't at least, if Don Pike at least hadn't reached out to a few of those senior West Coast people and said, do you want to come back? You talked about a list exploration. Is it a list Cole? Adam Simpson had talked about maybe 10 players off the list. And who should be nervous of those senior players and also the mid-tier guys?
I think there's really big decisions to come on people like, well, Andrew Gaff, I think, would have to be gone at the end of the season. He's out of contract. He has not been able to have an impact at AFL level for some time now. So you'd think that his card is marked. You'd think that Dom Sheed, a discussion on his future would be had. He's got a year of a contract to run, but he's had a lot of injuries over the last couple of years and has battled to have an impact at AFL level. And, of course, Jack Darling has been a whipping boy with Eagles fans for quite some time now, and he has 1 year of a contract to run. They've got quite a tall forward line. They've got quite a few young tall forwards trying to push into that group now, so there may be a conversation to be had with Jack Darling. There's a few mid-range players. You think Alex Witherden, Luke Edwards, Josh Rotham is another one. All these guys, I think, are out of contract at the end of the season or 1 year to go. Those guys are people that would be discussed. And then there's a young guy, Zane True, who's probably been their best player at waffle level this year. He's averaging 27 disposals a game in a team that hasn't performed pretty well. He's only had one quarter at AFL level as a sub. You'd like to see him play 2 or 3 games between now and the end of the season so the club can be sure, because you suspect that at 22 there's a decision coming on him at the end of the year.
Well, Duff, you've had a very busy day, mate. We thank you for your time.
No worries, guys. Thanks.
That's Mark Duffield, senior writer for Code Sports out there in the West. You mentioned the list, fellas. We talked a lot about Harley Reid. He's had an incredible first year. I just wonder about that young core group. I mean, what do they do? I don't think we've seen a lot of their development progression from these young players, and that must have been a big failing for Adam Simpson today. How do you rate the list, Ralphie? What's the next steps here?
They've got pillars, but they've got so many list holes, and that's why if I was someone like a Dean Cox, I'd say, I want to play with Jake Waterman. I want to play with a midfield that has Jinby and it has Harley Reid. I love the fact that we have got some young key defenders, Tom Barrass there. What did Logan Roy, though, say in Succession to his kids? You are not serious people. So what's this has not been a serious football club for a very long time. Let's have some conversations with Gaff and Sheed. Make the bloody tough calls. Get rid of the dead wood. If it's Jack Darling, if they're contracted or not. Whoever it is that comes in, Don Pike, you can be the Axeman if you want. Yep. Make the tough decisions and make the decisions you have not made for 3 or 4 years, because that's why they've been a list that's gone nowhere.
I feel like some of these young players have actually gone backwards this season. Like Ruben Jimby, I was excited by him. I don't know what I have him. Harry Barnett, I think, was a pick in the 20s. He's been struggling at
Is
waffle.
That the environment, though? That could be the environment in that situation. There's been so much unrest there. Clarkie, I just wanted to tell you this little stat here.
Yep.
Which was the team? Melbourne played West Coast on the weekend. Which was the younger team out of those two? You would normally say.
You would hope West Coast.
Okay,
but
they're not.
Sting's coming in.
The West Coast team that played Melbourne last weekend was 127 days older than the Demons. 25 years and 362 days, as opposed to 25 years and 235 days. Not massive, but that just shows there's a lot of old blokes in this team. We want to see some of the young guys coming through.
They certainly do. They need some uplift there. They did have 3 very good wins. When they beat Melbourne, we all celebrated that. But I think we need to see more development and progression. We speak about the potential replacement options. I think Dean Cox is the absolute front runner for this job. So highly rated there at Sydney. Spoke to Steve Johnson, who sat next to him in the Sydney coaches box today. He said he's ready. He's got the tactical acumen. He's got great man management, player relationships. He's got the list overview. He's great on the data, so he certainly ticks every box. I just wonder, how's this going to play out? Because Sydney, for a long time, Ralphie, hoped that he would be the successor to John Longmire. Longmire's surely not going anywhere. He's got a premiership list and contracted for another year. You'd think that'd be extended. So Dean Cox would take the job if it was offered at West Coast, surely.
Yeah, I think the succession plan's 3 or 4 years down the track, and that is so long to wait when you've got some star players here and when you can get a job at $1 million a year. I just think for John Longmire, think about how often he's been so close. So he kicked 98 goals. He kicked 2-8 in the final game. Missed the 96 flag. Gets in 99. He's won 3 in grand finals. It'd be Mick Malthouse. if he misses out with one flag and he's pushed out for Dean Cox, that is not the way that you orchestrate a succession plan.
That won't.
Sign him up long term, and Dean, go and coach your former club.
Succession plans have been fraught in danger. We've seen